Hi everyone, it's Nina Goradia. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner on the non-dual path. As I was shooting the last two videos, I noticed something about these two charts that I use side by side. Now, when I had them made, these colors were arbitrarily picked. And as I was explaining the last two videos just prior to this one, I was noticing something. I was telling you all about how the more that we are judging and meaning making and reacting, we inch ourselves further and further along this increased stress and activation, and that can take us into overwhelm, it can take us into freeze. And then I was thinking, well, yeah, that's pretty much what this top box is doing. It's reacting, it's judging. This is ego compensatory mechanisms. And when I engage in that, that causes activation. When I believe in that, and it creates an emotional experience in the body. And you can think of this in a reverse way. And so I'm going to show you this other chart that I just put together. And I feel really excited about it. So I just flipped this basically. And it's not that it's a one-to-one correlation, but these colors randomly go together. And I'm very excited about that because, as I was telling you, they were just chosen arbitrarily. But it's not that this is an exact correlation of this, but I'm going to tell you how I'm thinking of it. It's more that this chart, if you start here, it can explain the things that increase activation. So, again, these ego compensatory mechanisms, they're helping us to avoid feeling. So there's a true feeling of an experience, this green here, that if we ride it, we're going to get it discharged the way that animals do in the wild. And if this is new for you all, I suggest you watch the first two videos of this series before watching this one. So that's like a true feeling. But when I have ego kind of get in the way, trying to help me not feel my true feeling, that's going to increase the level of stress or activation. But in general, when I believe my thoughts and I react, I'm going to get an increase in activation, and that is going to cause some overwhelm instead of just the true green experience. So, this purple is the overwhelm. It's when I believe stuff about my experience that causes an increase in activation, and I overshoot this threshold where the energy releases. And if I am afraid of it or I try to resist it, that increases the activation even more. And this results as saved stored patterns in the body on this chart. But it can also help explain some of how it amps up the intensity on this chart. So it's not that this is a one-to-one correlation again. This is just something I've never thought of these charts that way. And I'm kind of even saying these things for the first time as I'm sharing with you. But you can think of this as what increases activation. Well, that's what egos do. They add on to your already clean experience in the body without ego. So it just adds on that load. And as we work on this stuff through these 5 hacks, and I will link a video here if you're new to this chart, and it will go into detail of how you can use those. But that's going to take the ego part out, the ego reaction, meaning making part out of your otherwise clean experience, like how wild animals do. They're not obsessed with what it means about them, their experiences. They're not making meaning out of things. They're just experiencing it in the body. So we can work on this to take the load off of our nervous system. And that is what is going to help us have that relief so that our bodies can work as they were designed to without the overwhelm of the ego just kind of draining and sucking the body dry of energy. I'm going to link a video here about the difference between psychological ego and somatic ego, where I talk about that. And so in the previous two videos and in the remainder of this series here, where I'm going to be using this chart, the next one will be about phone addiction. I want you to think of it in this way, where what am I doing that's increasing the level of stimulation in my life? For example, the first two videos we talked about doing, reacting, judging, and then in the last video, we talked about caffeine, stimulants. You can add nicotine or drugs in there, or phone addiction, workaholism, lifestyle factors where I am increasing the intensity of my experience on top of whatever my experience would have otherwise been. I'm going to also talk about food allergies. These are things that amp up the nervous system. And so we want to just be working with whatever load is already there in our bodies when we're working with trauma or life events that are happening in the present. And we want to be aware of what lifestyle factors and what egoic factors, what load we are adding onto this otherwise solely nervous system experience from the environment or from trauma. I hope that makes sense. I am just starting to think in this way of combining these charts together, so hopefully this will get clearer as I teach this over time and I think about it a little bit more. I'd love your feedback and stay tuned for the rest of the series.